Welcome to What the Fat. I'm your host, Dr. Ryan Lowery, co-founder of the Applied Science and Performance Institute, CEO of Ketogenic.com, and author of the Ketogenic Bible. Each week, I'll be bringing you interviews with top thought leaders in science, health, and fitness to deliver you the tools you need to thrive and optimize your life. I'll dive deep into topics surrounding entrepreneurship, mindset, and positivity so you can break through old habits and truly find happiness wherever you are. Without further ado, let's get into it. Hey guys, welcome back to What the Fat, episode 92. We have a very special guest, someone who's actually local and is doing a lot of incredible things. I'm excited for you guys to meet her. But today we have on Dr. Lisa Koche. She is absolutely incredible. I got to tell the story about how I found out about you. So literally in college, I was driving because I used to be around the Soho area, probably a lot more than I should have. And I was driving past and I saw this sign, and anytime I see the word keto or ketogenic, I'm like, what is that? And like I never thought anything of it. Like months, years went by, and then eventually like I came to get an IV one time, just like unexpectedly, and I was like, I'm going to go. And I drove up and I was like, that's the place. Like, that's the place where I saw the ketogenic stuff. So can you tell everyone a little bit about yourself, kind of what got you interested, what got you started into this field?
Absolutely. So I am an internal medicine doc, but have a very holistic / integrative practice and really on board the keto train for the past 5-6 years. Because of my own journey, which has been pretty incredible. Started at 15, unfortunately diagnosed with leukemia at that time, childhood leukemia. Had to go through chemo all through high school, and then it relapsed in college on one of my ovaries. They had to take it out, restart chemo again right after all my hair had grown back. That was not fun, not good times. And about halfway through that second round, I went into heart failure. So I was 20, went into heart failure. They gave me some meds. My uncle at the time, this is really kind of a cool sidebar, was a podiatrist, sent carnitine and CoQ10. I didn't know what they were because this was a while back. Even though I pretend like I'm 16, this was a while back. And I just took these vitamins, and because my parents weren't against holistic medicine, they just had a kid who was sick. So we went traditional. Actually the second time it flared, I was at Sloan Kettering in New York City. So my heart recovered, was able to stay in school on time, take my MCATs, get into med school, thought I wanted to do basically oncology and help kids. And my very first interview, the guy looked at me and said, there is no way that you want to do that. And I sat there for a second. I was like, oh my God, you're right. I want to prevent this. I don't want to treat this. So that was kind of another big turning point.
Wow, yeah, that's powerful.
And I went through that school, and the whole way along, I would just kept saying, why? Like, okay, these are the protocols we're memorizing, but why? And why are people getting sick? And nobody had any answers. So I went into internal medicine because it was kind of the broadest, most thought-provoking type of field, and I was all over trying to figure out the why. Got into residency, found out there they still didn't know. It was just kind of, it just happens and this is what we do.
Right.
So when I started practicing, I joined a group of cardiologists because I figured the best way to prevent disease in general was through obesity and prevention of cardiovascular disease. And so I joined this group as the preventive side of the cardiac practice. Started primary care practice and trained myself by shadowing in obesity with a gastric bypass surgeon. So I went with the real extreme obese folks. Trained myself in vascular by tracking a vascular surgeon and learning about, advanced lipid paneling, and also building the primary care practice at the same time. So
what was that like, working with like someone who, like you were working with severely obese individuals? Like how eye-opening was that to see some of these individuals come in and like have to really go through gastric bypass? Like that was their only option.
Absolutely. And I think, in 10 years from now, hopefully 10, 20 years from now, we're going to say exactly how barbaric that was. I mean, unfortunately, it was the only way that these people, they could get their lives back. So it was wild. It was a big, huge learning curve for me. I was able to create the team approach with a nutritionist and a psychologist because the insurances required that before they would approve the gastric bypass. So that was kind of the beginning of the practice, which is called Spectra, because it was a spectrum of services we were offering, and we were, having all these different healers in the space because the patients had to be evaluated in all those different ways. But then what happened is they'd go through the gastric bypass, they'd lose all this weight, and then they'd get all this metabolic mess. Hypothyroidism, exhaustion, I mean, just not okay. So I was really trying to figure out what else could possibly be going on. And around the same time I had my daughter, and after I had her, which first of all, nobody thought I could get pregnant with 5 years of chemo and 1 ovary, and I did on the first time, which was pretty cool. Amazing. I handled the pregnancy pretty well, but right after I crashed pretty quickly. I was very exhausted, blamed it on full practice and a baby, and eventually found I had Hashimoto's. So the pregnancy tipped me into that. Hashimoto's, psoriasis, sinus problems. I had to have sinus surgery, so I just kind of really fell in my health at that point, and went and researched more integrative approaches to thyroid. Found at that point, led me to the A4M and getting a fellowship in integrative medicine, kind of indirectly trying to heal myself and seeing the need with the patients. At one point, the gastric bypass surgeon, this is just a quick to summarize that story, stopped sending patients over to the clinic and called me in, and I was like, what's going on? He said, well, you went off on this tangent with hormones and like a dream, like, I don't know what you're doing. We're here to do gastric bypass. and I'm just going to bring this into the university now. We're not going to be working together anymore. I said, absolutely we are not, because I got to help these folks. So that was kind of how, and then we've just gone on from there with different adventures on bringing in different types of healers and things that I needed for my own personal health. And that's what brought me into the keto space as well.
Amazing. I'm excited to dive into some of the stuff inside of your practice. That's a lot to go through. That's a lot for one person, let alone like dealing with all of that and then coming out on the other end and truly wanting to help others kind of battle through that and prevent it in most regards. So how do you maintain that positive outlook? Like, is it you see the trials and tribulations that you've gone through? Like, what are some of the things that you do, like perspective-wise, daily? Is it meditation? Is it gratitude? What are some of those things that help keep that outlook and keep you striving to like, this is my goal. This is what I'm trying to achieve in my life?
Well, I love, first of all, you're even asking that question. It shows how awesome you are, Ryan, and your listeners know that, I'm sure. But I had sort of I just knew, it was a knowing. I have an inner knowing from day one when I was diagnosed at 15. I knew I was going to be okay. So even though it was rough, but I had a lot of family support, and every time something has come up, because it has continued, I knew there was some type of higher purpose. So I didn't really have music when I was younger, played the oboe and all the way through college, was an outlet for sure, was type of meditation. When I crashed again after my daughter, I just started little very light types of meditation exercise when I could get myself back up to it. I had previously been able to run 15 Ks even after my heart had rebounded. But the meditation and emotional and empowerment sort of piece has actually stepped up as the journey has gone on even more. So I had a big, huge relapse with my heart 2 years ago. Was in the hospital for 8 days. I almost died. They had the transplant cardiologist in with my cardiologist, had to put a device on my chest. And at that point was the breaking point, because I was called out on the fact that I potentially lacked self-love. So one of my colleagues said, you need to work on that. And I started meditating even more. So meditation for sure, visualization, picturing myself, knowing again, thank God, that I was going to be okay, knowing that the purpose was to help heal others. So I've always known I would have to be the toughest case to learn so that I could share it with the world.
Amazing. And you and I we talk a lot about the mental part. And I think a lot of times people overlook that. They say, oh, I'm just going to eat this way and exercise and everything will be fine. And they forget the entire aspect. Well, not only the mental part that goes into like emotional eating and exercise and stuff like that, but far beyond that with like how important meditation is, stress, fatigue, all of that kind of encompasses what we typically don't put time, energy, and effort into, but we probably should put more into that than like the nutrition stuff. Really on paper is pretty easy. You really have to focus on like the self-love, the gratitude, the perspective, the visualization, all of those concepts. So that's amazing. I know you work with a lot of your clients on that at Spectra.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about Spectra. Your offerings are like unlike anything else I've ever seen. It's really, really cool how you integrate a lot of different pieces together. And it's not just, hey, I'm going to go here and I'm going to get a cookie cutter thing that's like, hey, here you go. You need statins, or, oh, you need this. Like, you really take an integrative approach of, no, we need to look from this angle, this angle. You have like some of the coolest like biohacking, like we'll talk a little bit about different light techniques that you have. So one of the things before we get into the fancy stuff, I came for IVs, and I get a lot of questions all the time. People are like, why do you get IVs? Like, what are the benefits of that? What do you typically see? Like, what do you tell people a lot of, like, why someone might need an IV, or like, what are the benefits of like getting an IV?
So I think that may even tie back to what you were talking about with the stress piece. I mean, the way that we live now is not how this body was made, to handle. We're 24/7, and the environmental toxic load keeps going up. The food has more and more chemicals in it. Our life, you were expected to do and be everything and everyone. So we're just behind the 8 ball. I think the food, it doesn't have the nutrients it used to have. And to combat that stress, the IVs are one of the fastest ways to get you there. So we've been doing the basic Myers IV, which is mostly vitamin C, minerals, a little bit of glutathione and B vitamins, for probably about 10 years at the office now. And I'll just see people, if they're getting sick, they'll get over it within a day instead of 3 days. If you're traveling a lot, it picks you right back up. There's tons of different benefits potentially for IV vitamin therapy.
Definitely, and that's the main reason why I use it is like traveling all the time. Like, I'm on airplanes and who knows what is going on the airplane. So, but it's been an absolute game changer for me. It's not only that, but like hydration. Like, obviously you're getting a ton of fluids in and you become severely dehydrated when you're on planes and traveling. So I'm a huge fan of it. And I know soon you're going to start offering some like NAD IVs, right?
Well, we're looking into a lot of that. So I think with the plane travel, it's more than just people being sick on the plane. The real issue with plane traveling is free radicals. Yeah. So we don't fully understand the impact yet of free radicals, Wi-Fi, 5G, all of these invisible frequencies. Where they're acting, it seems, is on the mitochondria, and then really getting us, a lot of the patients who are just tired and sensitive to just electronics in general, or after a plane when they get off and they're really wiped out, are people that may be a little bit more energetically sensitive. So the IVs, and specifically we're moving into potentially using things that are more directed towards the mitochondria, like NAD, we're researching that right now, can help combat some of that added stress.
Yeah, and I know we're on the same page, and I think the root cause of most complications and problems obviously starts in your mitochondria. I know Dave Asprey talked about that, I think, in his last book. You talked a lot about it in your book. It's very important, and I think a lot of these things, nutrition is just one piece, like you said. Exercise is another piece. Both are very important, but there's a lot of other things that can work synergistically to not only help protect, but potentially even rebuild or create like mitochondrial biogenesis. What are some of the things? I know you have a bunch of cool, like you have this cool light vessel inside of your office. What are some of the other things? Can you describe and tell people a little bit what those are?
Absolutely. So I think first, just to mention mitochondrial biogenesis, which is kind of this big mouthful. That's what turned me on to the ketogenic diet in the first place. So back maybe 5-6 years ago, I was listening to a podcast with Mercola and Dom D'Agostino, and they mentioned that you could make new mitochondria. So I had no idea that was possible. And here I am, I went to one of the best med schools. I'm practicing, doc. I've had direct mitochondrial damage from chemo. I'm the one who needs it probably more than anybody, and I didn't even know it was possible. So the fact you can make new mitochondria was amazing. And then I realized that, his research was 15 minutes up the road. So went and kind of went down that keto path. So that's what brought me to not only eating that way, but then researching more and more things that could go synergistically with the ketogenic diet to optimize the mitochondria. One of the things is oxygen. So that the mitochondria basically is where we take oxygen and we take food and we make energy. So if we can optimize how oxygenated our blood is, we can feel better, have a lot better focus, just in general, optimal function. So we do have a device where you can pedal for about 15 minutes with 100% O2, take it away, push so that everything dilates and then flood the O2 back in. That's a pretty cool machine.
Really cool, yeah.
We do a lot to optimize mitochondria with detoxification. So the mitochondria are very sensitive to lots of different chemicals, and both light and detox in general can be combined in an infrared sauna. So we have an infrared sauna, and it's something that patients can try, but then they can buy for their home because it's portable and not terribly expensive. So those, and then the red light therapy we're just now going to bring in. It's just a little hard with some of the space constraints that we have. But what's really neat about the mitochondria and how people are looking at it only over the past few years is even in integrative medicine, and like you said, in nutrition and exercise, we thought the answers were there. We thought it was in thyroid and adrenals and leaky gut, and guess what? Those things are all really important. But the analogy I heard recently from somebody was it's like a ship where we've been patching the sails and the hull has a huge hole. So if we don't pay attention to the mitochondria, which is basically in every cell of our body except red cells, we're not going to get anywhere, or at least not sustain that level of improvement.
Amazing. And the lit bed, there's a bunch of different lights, different ones. Can you talk a little bit about, like, obviously there's red light, but then there's some other spectrums of light. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we have a device that somebody developed that has a combination of music, vibration, and color. So color therapy has been around forever, basically. You know, they've used it for mood, and most people may have heard of chakras, which are energy centers. They're associated with different colors. So on this particular bed, there's actually some protocols that the developer had that depending on what you have going on, what you're trying to treat, you can change the light spectrum for a session and utilize different wavelengths. So for people that are having gut issues, for example, we'll put it on lemon or yellow or orange, which is kind of correlates with that chakra, has more healing capacity to specific symptoms in the gut. Cardiovascular, more green. If patients are really anxious, I had a lady the other day who I just couldn't get her calmed down. She was in fight or flight and didn't want to take Xanax, and we just gave her some homeopathic and stuck her in on a violet color, and she came back a different person. So she's been, coming in every week now to try to avoid meds.
Amazing, amazing. Now, I love the entire integrative approach because you have, like, obviously you and the doctors that are at your clinic, and then also all of these cool biohacks and all these different things. What about nutritionally, like diving into that? What's typically that you see people come in? Do you typically see people who come in that are more, say, insulin resistant, or do you see people who sometimes who come in and they're completely insulin sensitive? They can handle carbohydrates. They're perfectly fine. What do you typically see in your practice?
Well, at this stage, because I've been practicing for a while, we have over 6,000 patients, so we have a little bit of everything. But by far, definitely not the athletic specimens that I think you tend to deal with. We have a lot of insulin resistance. We have a lot of high stress, a lot of hypertension, diabetes, autoimmune problems. So we are starting with those people. We'll try to clean up the diet, but on a new patient visit, if a patient's really off and feeling really bad, they're not going to go into a keto state. It's not even going to work. So we have to clean them up first. So we'll stage things where we'll work on, let's say, leaky gut, or knocking down viruses and yeast and other bacteria. And then once that's a little more stable, they can feel a little more clear. Then we'll start cleaning the gluten and the dairy and the sugar out. We'll do it in stages. And then once I get them feeling optimal, then we'll try to crank it up with mitochondrial biogenesis and the ketogenic diet or exogenous ketones.
Amazing, amazing. And what does a typical day look like for you? Because I always ask this of every guest because I think it's interesting. Some people are like, well, I'm just more low carb. Some people they fluctuate in and out. What is like a typical, I know you're busy. You see like 15 to 20 patients a day. Yeah. It's crazy. But what's a typical day look like for you, like eating wise?
So that's probably evolved over time. But when I first went keto, it was pretty hardcore for 4 to 6 weeks. And then I found I was getting tired. So that went along with a lot of my patients too. And back then, really nobody was doing it on general population. It was more still isolated in the athletic space or in the research centers. And I was seeing people get tired after 4 to 6 weeks, especially my women, or they were complaining of some hormonal imbalances. And I would ask at the conferences and they would tell me that doesn't happen, or they get more inflamed. Some of it was, I think, the choices they were making on the ketogenic diet in terms of the cleanliness of the proteins you guys talk about all the time. So for me, at that point, what I did was kind of inch back up a little bit, maybe to 50 grams of carbs, and I'll go more cyclical and more intuitive. So the biggest gift being predominantly keto adapted has given me is that I can see my 15 to 20 patients, and I can, if I can't get my lunch, I can have my fat coffee in the morning, and I'm good and I'm clear, and I can make it till 3, and I don't mind that I haven't eaten. So my typical day during the week, I'll have pretty loaded up coffee with everything from cacao to collagen powder to bone broth protein thrown in, with a lot of C8 and grass-fed butter. And then I will have something, whether it's a piece of protein and veggies or a salad for lunch, nuts and seeds. My dinner just mostly protein, veggies, and avocado, olive oil, something like that. And then I'll have my dark chocolate every single night and some berries. I throw in some berries. So I'm a little bit more cyclical, but predominantly very metabolically flexible at this stage, which is cool.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So you just do you do like berries with whipped cream, or is it just berries and dark chocolate?
More just the dark chocolate. I don't do as well with dairy, so I have to go. It depends on full fat and grass fed. I do okay. So it depends on the day, but yeah.
Amazing. I'm big on that. I love good dark chocolate. I think even like for people that are listening, it's not the dark, like the Hershey's dark chocolate.
Oh.
It's like unsweetened dark,
The 88%,
88 cacao.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's an acquired taste, but once you get it, it's really awesome.
Yeah. Now, when you have these people coming into your clinic, and some people are coming in and they're saying, hey, you know what, I want to make a change. I want to lose weight is what most people say, but they really want to lose fat and maintain muscle mass is what they want to do. How do you even introduce or transition them from like, all right, now you've cut out sugars, like they're like, you know what, I'm doing okay. They probably have lost a substantial amount. How do you now transition them and go, hey, let's start introducing you to like this keto thing? What is kind of that approach for you?
Well, thanks to you guys and all of us out there, they're kind of coming in and asking me, can I please go keto? So what I'll do is I kind of have to decide if I feel like they're ready, because when, it's a bit of a commitment initially and they're all nervous about eating more fat, we have to work through that a little bit. And my book, what I did was kind of take a bunch of different programs and condense it down so that there's no macro counting except for the carbs. I just like to make them very aware of their daily carb intake. So I'll have everybody start by just picking an app and tracking their daily carb intake. That's how we'll start. And if it's crazy high, we're not going keto yet. We'll just, cut them down to maybe 75, bring in some of the good fats, wake up their fat digesting enzymes, because if you go from being really insulin resistant, significantly overweight, and you don't eat fat, and then all of a sudden you're going to try to shift gear, you can get a lot of upset stomach, and they don't stay the course. Mm-hmm. So I find if I inch them down in steps, then they're ready.
Very cool. And I think that's most people who are really coming from a place of like, hey, they ate a bunch of garbage, and then they can't just immediately jump 100% in. And if they do, they typically are like, cool, this is great for like a week and a half. And then they jump back to like some carb. So I like the transition's really awesome. And like your goal, I know we've talked about this before, is like, really, how do you make this a lifestyle? How do you make this something that like, it's not I did that for 3 weeks, I need the next thing. It's like, no, how do you make this something that's sustainable, which is huge?
Absolutely. And I think, one of the other easy things I use as a tool is I'll tell them no carbs before 1. So I'll just try to get them used to cleaning the carbs out of, because there's no really good carbs that anyone eats for breakfast anyway. Right. So if we can clean that mess up and get them either used to a fat coffee or eggs or whatever they're going to have in the morning for breakfast, I find the craving centers tend to turn off a little bit faster, and then we can transition them quicker to even lower carbs throughout the rest of the day.
That's smart. And I'm always interested because like we know like a lot of the in-depth research and stuff like that, but ultimately it comes down to practicality, and that's a really cool, just easy, quick tip. Like, hey, no carbs before 1, and there's research legitimately showing like if you have a higher protein, higher fat breakfast, you're more satiated throughout the entire day versus if you have like the American Heart Association grain toast and oatmeal and fruit for breakfast. That's a
And
really
orange
cool tip.
juice.
And orange juice, of course.
Yeah, and what I find is, when patients come in, there are different levels of basically being ready to take charge of their own health. And so if I tell them they're done, like they can't have gluten, dairy, carbs, initially, because I usually try to clean up their diet from an immune standpoint for about 30 days, and then we'll add back in grass-fed dairy. They'll glaze over and they're out. So instead it becomes, hey, we're just going to shift the time. Let's try to get some good fats and let's wake up the fat enzymes, cut your cravings down. If you really want your sweet potato, your apple, your whatever, good carbs you still want to eat, that's okay. Let's just shift it to, as afternoon or evening. And then when they start feeling a lot better and they're starting to get more stamina and energy, then we'll say, hey, we can bring this down a little bit more.
Very interesting. And you talk a lot about these principles in your book, Get Lit. Can you tell us a little bit more about like what inspired you to write it and kind of what people can expect inside of it?
Absolutely. So I got really lucky because after my second kid, so I had my daughter, crashed a bit, had to rebuild my body. So my kids are actually 8 years apart, was able to have a second child with, at 41 with one ovary and 5 years chemo without IVF, which was kind of a miracle, but I did crash a bit after having him from a cardiovascular standpoint. So he was only about 2, and a healer came in that worked with one of the nutraceutical companies that I utilize, and he just looked at me and said, hey, when's your book coming out? Because you got too many cool things going on here. You got to share it with the world. And I said, well, I can barely make it to the bathroom when I have to pee, so I'm not sure that I have time for that. Yeah. And he said, I'm going to help you. So he actually decided to pick it up, interview me. We turned it in. We had a great idea to turn it into a Q&A format so people could just open it up and get questions answered. It's an easy read and about 45-minute read, and it has actionable steps anywhere along the way that people can take. So I'm getting a lot of really good feedback, especially on the plan in the back, which kind of holds your hand through the steps of getting your body, fuel, and mind optimized.
Yeah, it's perfect. I love how it's set up, and it's a huge resource for like accountability. I love the part in the back where it's like, oh, daily check-ins, like check in here, report back. Like that's what people need. They need to be able to have that type of reinforcement. So
yeah, and they get glazed over with, sometimes it's the calculations of the macros, as you know, and so just to be able to check it off, it's a serving. And we also really went through different types of concepts about recipes, and my nutritionist buddy and I basically decided, hey, nobody wants another recipe book because they can find it online. Why don't we help them just open their fridge or open their cabinet and make whatever is in there? So that's what we did. We took different bases, proteins. We focus on lit foods versus dim foods, trying to get foods that even if they have a little bit of carb, maybe have more nutritional value, so they're worth taking in.
Amazing. And we're coming to the end here, so I want to talk about 2 things that are very, very important. One, future trends. You're on the cutting edge. Like you're seeing a lot of what's coming up. Like I know we just talked a little bit about things like exosomes and stuff like that. Yeah. What do you see as kind of like the next horizon? Like what do you see kind of trending and that people are like, wow, I didn't even know that was coming or that was here yet?
Yeah, so I think it's already sort of here, which is optimizing mitochondrial function on other levels. So, the light therapy that you've alluded to, utilizing sunlight, the fact that we need the sun, which, we've been told that it's bad for us for so long, different hacks, including something called exosomes, which you mentioned, which are growth factor / signaling molecules that can help turn on our own stem cells. Different ways to enhance communication between the cells, the mitochondrial function. How do we continue to optimize mitochondrial biogenesis, get new mitochondria made? And that'll be through additional IV therapies. Again, knowing that you need to optimize the basics like the gut and work on infectious etiologies and detox. So a combination of all of that.
One of the things, and we got to pilot around with this, and it would probably be cool for it to look at this, is like the delivery of exogenous ketones through IVs. I know they've done studies on that, but like I don't think anyone's ever done that. I'd be curious to see how quickly it elevates levels compared to like just oral exogenous administration, or like even just in combination with like a Myers or something.
Oh yeah, no, I think that would be great. We'll have to see, that would be up and coming for sure.
That'd be interesting. And now this is a question I get a lot, and this is completely not medical advice or anything, but you went through a very crazy experience early on, but that happens to a lot of people, whether it's people themselves getting a diagnosis of something like cancer or their children. The biggest question I always get is, how do I have that conversation with my doctor? How do I get them, like, I know all these things, like I heard this on the podcast, Dr. Lisa was talking about this and this, I want to implement it, but like my doctor's like, no, that's stupid. Or like, how do you open that conversation? How, if you were to go back and you weren't the rock star that you are, how would you go back and like bring something or have that conversation with your medical doctor?
I think it depends. I would say, first off, it's going to depend on the doctor, obviously. So you want to make sure that you feel that the doc is somewhat open. I think just asking questions, maybe coming in with some resources, because especially as like primary care docs, I mean, we're slammed. We're seeing 20 people a day. We've got people that have to be admitted. We've got doctors calling us. We have charts. We may finish our day. We still have 2 hours of labs to go through. So expecting us to be really up on the newest cutting edge, information is rough. I am, because I had to heal my own body. I didn't have a choice. So I think going in a little more understanding. I do get somewhat perturbed hearing a lot of people in this space in general very easily criticizing doctors. And I think taking the approach, and some deserve it, don't get me wrong, but I think we didn't go into medicine, thinking that we were going to just push meds. It's just what we're taught. So going in, get some information, just pique their interest a little bit without being overwhelming. I had a lady just the other day came in to see me, and she literally healed herself from podcasts, listening to information on podcasts. So she found me through a podcast. Amazing. So, I mean, the world we live in is so incredible now. And I think it's just kind of this collaboration between doctor and patient and healer. And the more we talk, the more we share, the better.
I love that. And I'm so excited that you brought that up, because I feel the same way. Like, as much as, are there some people who are just out there and it's malicious? Yeah, certainly. But most docs, like, that's why I'm so encouraging of like, listen, they went to school to help people, period. Like, the fact is, they're seeing a lot of patients. Like, I can't be like, oh, I have time to do all this research and expect someone who's seeing 15 to 20 patients a day to be able to look at the same research. Like, they're more worried about preventing someone from having a heart attack, where I'm worried about like, oh, cool, I got to make sure Scooter's fed in the morning. Like, that's the difference. And so I love that. And so going in with more compassion and hopefully having resources or guides to go along with it and be able to be like, hey, here's something really quick. I know you're super busy. Is this something?
Don't go in with resources that are like really, really fat and like pages and pages. Just something short.
Right. Like, quick and a couple pages. Like, can you take a look at this when you get some spare time?
Yeah, absolutely. That's perfect.
That's the way to do it. I love it. Well, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. You've been absolutely amazing, and I know people are going to really enjoy this episode and took so much away from it, and they have to check out some of the work that you're doing. Absolutely. Where can people find you? Where can they find more about your clinic and then follow you on social media?
Absolutely. So you can follow us, drlisakoche.com. Spectral Wellness Solutions is the name on Instagram and Facebook. So we'll look forward to seeing them. I'd love to come back because we could talk a lot longer.
Yes, and we definitely have to. And one of the things we talked about, and we're going to make happen no matter what, is we got to figure out a way to integrate some of what you're doing with ASPE and figure out how to do more and more research on some of this stuff, because it's so interesting. And there's so much still yet to be learned, especially on like the mitochondrial health, that I just feel like we need to get out to the world, and that's ultimately what both of our goals is.
It's an amazing time to be alive with how fast the research and everything we're learning is moving. So we're really lucky to be here and be in this space.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Guys, that's it. Make sure you check out Dr. Lisa, everything that she has going on. Make sure you check out the clinic. And if you're ever in Tampa, you have to stop by. It's really, really awesome. So I appreciate you guys tuning in. As always, make positivity loud. Thank you for listening to this episode of What the Fat. I'd love to hear from you. So hit me up on Instagram or our Facebook group with topics you'd like to hear about. If you really enjoyed what you heard on today's episode, then do me a huge favor and subscribe and review this podcast on iTunes. If you think someone you know would really enjoy this, please feel free to share with your friends and family. Till next time, make positivity louder.